Ferguson case continues to smolder, and if you're worried about images of a militarized police force wrangling rioters, the National Guard has rolled in, and there's nothing police-like about them at all. So if you're squeamish about guns and camo, avert your eyes. Michael Brown's death has created a cultural limbo, and too many people are eager to fan the flames of race and class before important facts are known. Brown's family is understandably distraught. Of course they are. But swift, emotional justice is the worst response. If we're going to talk about a military-style response, I want to know how law enforcement departments got this way, if this evolution to the suburban battlefield has been slow going, and why does it take tragedy to keep things in check? Could unions be to blame for the state of the Union of Over-Armored Police? We'll get into Ferguson, experimental drugs, and we'll probe the mind of Andrea Tantaros. This is The Independence. Hi there, I'm Kennedy, your hostess, along with the clever and curious Reason Magazine editor-in-chief. It's Matt Welch, and emotion's biggest enemy. It's Kmele Foster from Free Think Media. He is on fire, and together we are The Independents. The National Guard has been called up to calm the violence, tension, and frayed nerves in Ferguson, Missouri. The town has become a spectacle as people there are becoming all too familiar with the glare of international interest. The president spoke today about Michael Brown's shooting, and he's deploying Attorney General Eric Holder to get a handle on the hottest race situation since Trayvon Martin. Plenty of questions remain, and manufactured outrage is fueling the already thick flames of hostility. How can Ferguson move past the flashpoint? With us, it's a fantastic party panel for a Monday, for any day, party people. It's Kevin Williamson, correspondent for the National Review, and Jimmy Failla, stand-up comedian, former cab driver, and man of the people. All right, now we know that the cop involved in the shooting, we know his name now, we know the police chief is essentially incompetent, and we want things to calm down. How can they do that? Why can't we do it? What's going on in Ferguson, Jimmy? I'm going to start with you.
Well, I was going to say thanks for having us on such a night of comedy gold. We've got police brutality and Ebola. It's just such a great night to be here. I have been following this very closely. And I am of the mind that we almost need to ban Al Sharpton. As well-intended as he is, I can't think of one of these situations he's walked into and left things better and more calm.
Yeah, actually made things better. Actually surveyed the situation and said, okay, what can we do to make people feel better, to calm things down, to think rationally? Doesn't happen.
But what has he done bad this time?
Well, you know what it is? It's not particularly this time, but I just feel like he's so synonymous with, like, Rachel, he's pissed off the people from Friends. People and Friends are upset. There'll be no reunion.
And by the way, he stole that haircut about 14 years ago, and he hasn't given it back.
Racial agitation. Like, if you look at the case right now, 57% of blacks feel that the cop is guilty of murder. 17% of whites don't. 24% of other Latinos don't. We've kind of divided the case along racial lines again. And I feel like, you know, you've never been to a town where they were like, this place is great. And somebody was like, well, you should have been there a week ago before Sharpton got here. It was a mess. You know, I just think he's synonymous with things just getting worse. And he might be well-intended, but this situation is clearly out of control, wouldn't you say?
And to answer Matt's point, I mean, what hasn't Sharpton already said 12,000 times in so many situations like this? And I think, you know, even the residents who desperately need some understanding, like thoughtful people who are trying to figure out how we got into this situation, they're apathetic to Sharpton. Now, Kevin, you've been writing about Ferguson. What have you found?
Well, I mean, there are sort of two separate conversations going on. You've got, you know, kind of libertarians like me who want to talk about the militarization of police.
Which is a very important issue, and I'm glad it's coming up.
And a lot of conservatives complain that, well, this would be going on even if not for that, and maybe it's overstated. Both of these things can be true. That can be a problem, and it can be the case that these would be going on. I don't mind using riot police when they're actual riots and, you know, civil disorder. I mean, that's what they're there for, but we use them all the time for everything. A week ago Monday, I was coming to work in my office here in New York, and there were 4 NYPD guys in body armor and helmets carrying carbines in front of Le Pain on Park Avenue.
Oh, no. Like, I told you gluten was the real enemy.
They are looking for the world's most dangerous muffin burglar, apparently. And this is the problem. I live down by City Hall. It's always covered up by guys in carbines. So it makes sense to use this stuff on occasion, but you have places like you know, Austin, Texas, where I used to live, where they use the SWAT team to serve every felony warrant, whether it's, you know, bounce checks, unpaid child support.
And the SWAT team's a really good thing. I'm glad you bring that up, because that's certainly not what it was intended for.
No, they're intended for bank robberies and hostage
situations.
Daryl Gates back in the day, but now 80% of it is used to execute search warrants and drug warrants, chiefly among that. I think Mark Stein talking about, I mean, it's an interesting moment among conservatives, because you have people like Kevin and Mark Stein, who also writes for National Review, and other people writing some very, very strong strong critiques of how we got here through over-militarization. Then you have people like Kevin's boss, Rich Lowry, writing today, basically, the militarization is all kind of overdone. So the right is struggling with this. I think the left is also struggling with this because you have a lot of kind of outrage. Yes, this must be another racism thing. But a lot of these people, including the Democrats who served the local area around St. Louis, they all voted against cutting back the militarization of police. And so it cuts both ways.
And when we talk about this, and Kmele, I want to talk to you about this, because the first thing I thought when I started reading this morning specifically was Democrats are always in bed with the unions. And, maybe it's one-sided for me, but I'm constantly going to unions as the focus of unrest like this. And now in New York, it's cops versus teachers. How powerful are these police unions? Do they want this military? Do they want these armored vehicles and, this insane artillery? And are Democrats willing to bend over for unions?
The police unions, like most other public employee unions, serve the interest of the police officers first and foremost. Certainly, when we look at a situation like this, the serial ineptitude on the part of the law enforcement officers, not the officers themselves necessarily, but the leadership certainly, and the civil leadership there, has just been on display from the very outset. It is almost certainly the case that nonsensical lack of transparency, almost deliberate opacity when it comes to this case, is what led to a lot of the inflamed tensions in the very beginning. The notion of having a body laying on the street, uncovered for hours apparently, is absolutely unconscionable and just bizarre.
I want us to assume that the incompetence didn't start with the shooting.
Absolutely.
That they didn't just wake up one day and stop.
And there it might be, we talk about systemic racism, but that might be systemic incompetence.
Absolutely.
Which is just as dangerous and just as bad.
There's nothing inconsistent about sort of criticizing the police officers on one side and then looking at the opportunistic hooligans who show up in Ferguson and are stealing hair from local businesses, stealing Jordans from the shoe store, using Molotov cocktails against the police. Neither one of those things is appropriate, and it's absolutely correct. It is appropriate to use SWAT in response to that. It's not appropriate to use SWAT to run reporters out of McDonald's or to lock them up arbitrarily because they're standing in your way.
I mean, they've set up basically freedom pens for the journalists and everybody else to work for. And as soon as you creep out of it, a guy from Getty Images tonight, Scott Olson, was arrested because he crept out of his freedom cage and went out and tried to actually take pictures of people, so they throw him in the paddy wagon. Obama today said, we have to be good to the press trying to exercise their First Amendment rights. When you establish a curfew, there are no First Amendment rights. I mean, it's about assembly.
But there isn't a curfew tonight with the National Guard in town.
But
and that certainly changed the tenor, and I know it did in Los Angeles during the LA riots in 1992 when the National Guard came in. There was a different feeling in the streets because, your mistrust gets you kind of rest for a little bit, and you don't feel like
the fact that it's gotten to this point, I think, really is a demonstration of failure. Robert Peel, who founded the world's first real police department in London in 1829, said that you can tell if a police department's effective because you don't see them. They're not on the streets. The measure of police departments is the fact that you don't need them. If you see a lot of police out on the streets, having to, barricade the streets off and roll in around in armored vehicles, that means that they failed previously.
And they've had problems. They didn't release the cop's name. We don't know the ballistics from the cop car. We know some of the autopsy report, although those have been
not the real one, really.
And Michael Bodden wasn't privy to the clothes and a lot of the forensics.
The fluidity of the narrative at this point, though, is pretty disturbing. There is a lot of enthusiasm on the part of folks who are coming out and protesting. This hands up, don't shoot meme that was perhaps manufactured out of whole cloth.
We don't know
because the autopsy seems to suggest that wasn't shot in the back. Perhaps he was.
That's what Bodden said. Bodden doesn't have a dog in the hunt. He waved his feet to help the family out, Jimmy.
Well, I think this is where social media hurts. I think everybody's in such a rush in social media for the digital pound of flesh that we've convicted this guy already with a very small percentage of pertinent facts. What was the 9/11 call that came over before he addressed this guy? What were the actual ballistic records? We don't know.
Okay, but the police department, to their detriment, in not releasing that information, has made the protest, the Chernobyl it's
conspiracy.
so much worse.
Their press
They make
conferences.
it look like a cover-up, even if they have nothing to cover up.
Have you ever thrown a party when your parents go away and then for some reason they come home? That's the police. That's the police department in Ferguson. Who's there? Every one of their press conferences, like you can tell they're looking around like, I hope they don't hear the guy upstairs. It's exactly that.
Mark Stein had the greatest idea, which is if you're going to transfer even this much equipment from the federal government to a local police department, they have to put dash cams everywhere and cameras on.
And that was the best point of that Mark Stein column was dash cams are so inexpensive.
Yeah.
Anyone can get a GoPro or something like it for a couple $100, but all of a sudden, you know, you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars in armored vehicles, but you can't put a dash cam on?
And I hate any time to say anything nice about the president, but to his credit, when he was a state legislator, he did work for a law to require videotaping of interactions with people during interrogations and such things.
Didn't mention that in his press conference today. Shocking.
Which it protects the police as well as victims and those who interact with police.
And of course, but they're now arresting people for videotaping the police doing their business in public. So it seems like maybe they're not all that camera oriented.
Okay, well, I know, Kevin, you are oriented to a super interesting issue that has to do with the right to try and experimental drugs. We're going to get to that later in the show. Jimmy, you guys are both going to come back, so stick around for that. It's going to be very good. The president also addressed the ongoing conflict in Iraq, airstrikes ISIS, and that really big damn. This is The Independent. Love you. Welcome back to The Independent. The president spoke today, not just about Ferguson and Michael Brown. He also took some softballs from the press on Iraq.
There are going to be many challenges ahead. But meanwhile, there should be no doubt that the United States military will continue to carry out the limited missions that I've authorized, protecting our personnel and facilities in Iraq, in both Erbil and Baghdad, and providing humanitarian support as we did on Mount Sinjar.
All right, for a guy who's just come off vacation, he looks exhausted. He really does. He looks like he's given up. That's what I was thinking all throughout his press conference. But we got to ask, who is ISIS? And why are we having such a hard time figuring out how many of those little bastards are running all over the shiny new caliphate? Are the jihadists more socially sophisticated than we are? And are we headed for another ongoing big war? Yes. So says Eli Lake, senior national security correspondent at the Daily Beast. Welcome back, Eli.
Thanks so much for having me.
So let's talk about a couple of the pieces that you've written lately. Number one, why are we having such a hard time getting our thumb on ISIS, who they are, how many, and what exactly they're doing?
Well, one of the problems is that in their military assaults in their sort of campaign throughout Iraq, they've benefited from allied forces, which are not necessarily part of ISIS, but fight alongside them. So figuring out how the command and control works and whether some of these forces, whether they're former Baathists that were loyal to Saddam Hussein's sort of secular socialist ideology, or whether they're just tribal leaders who were so furious at Maliki and his persecution of other Sunni leaders, is a question as to really the full size of ISIS and how big it is. The one thing, though, that the intelligence community does know, based on a briefing they gave to us last week, is that there are thousands of foreign fighters who've joined the fight with ISIS, and sometimes they go back to their countries. In some cases, those are Western countries, and they do believe that ISIS poses a threat to the West and the United States.
All right, that's one thing I want to ask you about.
Yeah.
Is Europe safer because there are ISIS fighters who were jihadists sort of embedded in Western Europe, and do they sort of breathe a sigh of relief when, you know, ISIS is going after Yazidis and other ethnic and cultural minorities?
Well, I don't think anybody really breathes a sigh of relief. I mean, it's a humanitarian catastrophe.
Of course.
No, because I think there's two reasons why I don't think it's safer for them. One, it creates a kind of momentum for, you know, people who would already be prone to being into the jihadist narrative, that they're continuing to kind of gain territory, and they, you know, have announced a caliphate, and it so far hasn't fallen, and they seem to be able to hold these cities. So in that respect, that's not good news. But in the other sense, a lot of times fighters will leave Europe and then return to Europe, according to kind of U.S. intelligence estimates. We've already seen one incident in France in terms of a museum attack, or maybe that might have been the Netherlands, which was linked back to ISIS. So there have been cells that have gone to Iraq and Syria and then returned. And it's very hard to catch people if they're traveling under Western passports, particularly given, you know, the mood that a lot of Western countries are in now in light of all the Snowden revelations. politicians to try to be more mindful of the privacy of U.S. and Western citizens.
Eli, you wrote another good piece about how Obama is sort of embracing a war on terror, which he has otherwise had been distancing himself from. Wanted to drill down on that. He's been using the September 14th resolution from 2001, the authorization of the use of military force, this whole time, but he's been advocating for it to be sort of torn up. Is he changing his mind on the basic legal documents for the war on terror?
Well, actually, on the September 14th resolution, on this latest stuff with Iraq, he didn't use that, and he didn't use the 2002 authorization just for the Iraq War, which is still on the books, which Obama has asked Congress to finally take off the books and dissolve. So in that respect, he's relying on his constitutional powers as commander-in-chief, the same kind of powers that led, Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson and Richard Nixon to fight the Vietnam War, which is they would call it a police action, and they did not believe that it was something that required a formal authorization from Congress. Because of something called the War Powers Act, President Obama has been informing Congress when he expands that mission. But that mission has expanded since about 10 or 11 days ago when he announced that airstrikes would begin in Iraq. Originally, it was about Mount Sinjar and protecting U.S. facilities and U.S. personnel. Now it's in more general, providing humanitarian relief, and now that we see the U.S. is providing airstrikes to take back the dam in Mosul, you're also seeing another kind of mission, which is to protect the infrastructure of Iraq and prevent ISIS, in his word, from taking actions that would permanently damage or cripple a nation.
Eli, we've got about half a minute left here.
Yeah.
I wonder about the situation in Iraq right now and the situation we saw in Libya. The president seemed pretty optimistic about the intervention right now today, but I also remember a heck of a lot of optimism about the intervention in Libya, which has not turned out quite so swimmingly. Would you care to cast odds on how this all turns out and what the end result is in Iraq?
Well, if President Obama is committed, along with European countries, to a significant kind of support role with the Iraqi military, then I think that would be substantially different than Libya. But in Libya, the president believed that the most important thing was to get rid of Gaddafi. But he did not play much of a role in helping the Libyans themselves try to secure the country from chaos in the aftermath, and we're seeing what's happening there.
All right, in 5 seconds or less, is Maliki's resignation enough for peace?
Not by itself.
All right, very good. Eli, please come back soon.
Thank you.
Very good. Andrea Tantaros from The Five and Outnumbered. She's going to join us a little later on. And next, we'll get into the racial and cultural implications of ongoing tensions in Ferguson. Stay with us. It's The Independent.
To a community in Ferguson that is rightly hurting and looking for answers, let me call once again for us to seek some understanding rather than simply holler at each other. Let's seek to heal rather than to wound each other. As Americans, we've got to use this moment to seek out our shared humanity that's been laid bare by this moment.
Heal, don't holler. It looks like it's going to be a while before residents in and around Ferguson start the healing process. And while people like basketball legend Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, go Bruins, are trying to help, they end up exacerbating an already fragile and dangerous situation. Are those claiming to heal doing more harm than good? Santita Jackson joins us. She's a Fox News contributor, and she's in Chicago. I wish you were here so I could see your beautiful face, Santita. Welcome back to The Independent.
Oh, I'm giving you a hug tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I need it, and you need it, and we all need it, because there are crazy times, and it seems like things are going to get a little bit worse before they get better. Do you think the sort of vocal activism that we've seen over the years in various situations like this, do you think at this point it kind of hurts more than it heals, or is there still a place for it?
Oh, never, never, never. I think that freedom of speech, freedom of expression is so important to all Americans. Indeed, it's important to all human beings. At this moment, I think that we have an opportunity to look at government overreach, and I think that we can look at it from the left, from the right, Democrats, Republicans, libertarians, whoever, because I think that that's a problem for all Americans, whether you're looking at Waco, Ruby Ridge, or even Ferguson. People are reacting to this because they're worried about government going too far. In this case, government as represented by the police.
Santita, I mean, you're saying all of the right things. It's a problem, though, for me, because as I listen to the narrative in the news, I hear race invoked a great deal. I've seen articles about redlining and all sorts of stuff. The president mentions his Brothers Keepers program 2 or 3 or 4 times today. there is a question that comes up. It's not in his principal remarks, but there's a question that comes out about the militarization of the police force. There are very real, serious problems that need to be addressed. We need to talk about dash cams and all these other important things.
Sure.
But I wonder if all the chatter about race is a bit of a distraction that may be crowding out serious conversations about that stuff.
Well, now, is this Kmele?
Of course it is. Who else?
Oh, my goodness, because I can't see you, but I'm sending you everybody. I'm sending everyone a hug. Look, you said I was saying all the right things, but you disagreed with what I'm saying. Which is it? Look, I think that race is never chatter. I think that race and racism, that's part of the American conversation, but we have to look at race for what it is. Race is a form of classism. I think that's what Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was that was the point that he was trying to make today. But that's the point that the civil rights movement historically has tried to make. They have said, look, we've got to break through this barrier of racism so that we can deal with the real issues of poverty, which have doubled, has doubled in Ferguson since 2000. I mean, if we are going to have a real conversation, you can't just take race out of the mix. You can't take sexism out of the mix.
Sure.
You have to look at everything.
I just wonder
and I think
if
that we're mature enough to do that.
I just wonder if the suppositions about race might not influence the conclusions that we reach. If the end of this conversation is, we need more black cops in Ferguson, and you don't put cameras in the dash cams,
You're
and you
talking
don't
to the
put
wrong
in
person.
civil public folks to come in and look at a situation like this after the fact, you haven't solved the problem. I would prefer white cops and cameras.
Look, let me tell you something. Black faces in high places doing the wrong thing, that's not going to be helpful. At the end of the day, what we need justice, not just for us, but for everyone. I think that is the plea. As you watch these sympathetic demonstrations all around the country, you're watching multiracial demonstrations because people are hurting and people see Michael Brown as their brother, as their son, as their child. I think that there is no one who could look at his mother today who expected to be getting a call from him in college this week. I don't think that anyone, white, black, brown, yellow, or red, can feel anything but sympathy for her. And so I'm hoping that we can take this as a teachable moment, a reachable moment, so that we can look at dash cams. I mean, because you have some police officers who are African American, who are Hispanic and on, and who are women, who are going to say, wait a minute, Officer Wilson, I understand where he was. You have a lot of people from all different sides, all areas of the American spectrum who might see this very differently. They might take umbrage with that. But I think Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and many other responsible leaders are saying, look, what we need to do is stop for a moment, take a breath. Let's find out what happened to Michael Brown. Let's find out why this happened to Michael Brown. Let's have community policing. I think that's what Captain Johnson brings to the mix. He's someone who's been on the ground. He's someone who empathizes with the Ferguson community, not just because they're black, but because he's a father. He's got a family. And so I'm hoping that we can elevate the dialogue so that we can get beyond this moment and so that we can have no more Michael Browns. Because, the fact is 2 out of 3 rural communities in America now have paramilitary units. 90% of cities or towns with populations of more than 500,000 people have SWAT units.
And
90%.
You know what,
I'm
sorry to cut you off, Santita, but we're up against a hard break. But you bring up a very good point because, oftentimes we talk about this stuff. It sounds theoretical, and people say, well, what's wrong with having that stuff? The police are there to protect me. Well, when it doesn't work in your favor, this is what's wrong with the situation. And by the way, if I were a mother of a non-black child and Eric Holder didn't go to my town to see what was wrong, I would feel kind of gypped. And I think we run the risk of not only over-racializing it, but over-politicizing it. And you're absolutely right. We need to have a smart discussion and wait for all the facts. Thanks for coming on, Santita.
Thank you. God bless you all. Mwah, to everybody there
tonight. Can't wait to see you again. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Hillary Clinton is an impossible diva, and she's only outmatched by a smarmy fake president. The topical storm is next. Nobody knows your need for nutty news like we do, so go ahead and depress the accelerator. This is the topical storm. Topic number 1, Hillary Clinton is a big pain in the arse. Turns out the former Secretary of State not only charges a colossal spanking fee, almost $300,000 a top. She also reportedly insists on a presidential suite, up to 5 extra rooms for her travel aides and advanced staff. She has a team go out 3 days early and start doing a little recon. She can be the only one on stage during her 90-minute presentation, and you have to fly Her Royal Highness in a $40 million private jet. Or she'll tinker with your brakes and make it look like a suicide. Her defenders say these are standard demands all the big-name global speech stars get, but let's be honest, she makes Axl Rose look like the Dalai Lama.
Van Halen, which are famous for doing the brown M&Ms
Green.
writer, actually they wanted to exclude green so that they had brown.
Yeah. But we all know there are a lot more colors than green and brown.
There are. Don't derail me just yet. David Lee Roth explained that the reason for doing that is that they had a very complicated technical stage show with lights and everything like that. It was only the people who would pay attention to that kind of detail would therefore not jeopardize their health as they were exploding light stages and all this kind of stuff. She's got no excuse. She's worse than even Van Halen.
She has the best excuse. This is what bosses do. If I am coming to speak in your town,
And that's
know
what
this
you
is
want
the
to be
sort of rider
president?
that I'm using. I didn't say that.
That's what's
I'm
going to
just saying
happen.
this is
You
what
want her to be a
bosses do.
president. Why don't you just go vote for her right now?
Bosses do.
You know what they'd make you do. All right, topic number 2. And more vomit in your mouth, Hillary Clinton news. You all know Kevin Spacey is the Machiavellian president on House of Cards. Spoiler! But do you know he's an unashamed kiss-ass and Clinton shill? Check out this fake spot he did with the woman who will one day be his equally unlikable counterpart.
Look, we have to talk about this baby named for Chelsea. Now, I was thinking, if it's a boy, we should encourage them to name him Frank.
Kevin, will you please just sign my husband's birthday card already?
And she did some horrible acting before that and tried to pretend like, well, Bill, I can't get you an elephant.
I remember when actors had self-respect, damn it. No, what they should do is tell politicians to go take a long walk off a short pier. It's not sexy. It's not interesting. Tell them no.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why. I mean, there's always been this, you know, all the Rat Pack guys wanted to be super close with JFK and same thing. But then there's always been this sexy fascination between Hollywood and the presidency and politics. It's gross. Barfing. Topic number 3, because we're sad that Shark Week is gone and we're having Shark Week withdrawals. A family in Alabama hunted a mammoth gator within an inch of its life. And they nabbed perhaps the world's biggest alligator.
Jeez.
Oh yeah, Mandy Stokes and her family took 10 hours to kill and capture the 1,100-pound, 15-foot-long meaty morsel, which is certainly the largest ever caught in the state, and they might get the world record. And when I hear all this talk about Alabama and gators, it makes me realize I hate the SEC.
Fair and balanced.
That's right. That's absolutely right. There are a bunch of people
Tell
in the
that to Chef
southeastern
Smith next
United
time you're on the show.
Yeah, I will. I totally will, and I've said it, and I'll say it again.
Okay.
Yeah. Are the Rebels part of the SEC?
I'm not sure.
I don't know that. Well, I don't know. I'm not going to say anything at this point. I'm just not going to say anything. But I think you know exactly what I'm saying. Yeah, go Bruins for the second time on the show. It's a live television show. Fun for us. Topic number 4. There was a minor earthquake in the Hamptons over the weekend.
Oh my
The
gosh.
Tony Long Island Enclave is a summer playground for New Yorkers and their wealthy neighbors. And fracking wasn't to blame for the seismic activity. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie decided to shake his flesh maracas on stage when Jamie Foxx invited him. Hail to the teats. Look at that. Yeah.
This is how we do it.
Oh,
A lot of
that is
pelvic
how they do it.
thrusting in this routine.
There's way too much. Someone's
my
going to get
goodness.
injured because someone's going to get
Look at the
walloped.
pelvic thrust.
Yeah.
There it is. Right at the crowd.
Is he wearing like a Luke Skywalker belt there?
Oh, did he
I
jump
think
off the stage?
He's wearing plus-size Dockers. And at one point, John McCain was actually dancing.
He did the robot.
Yeah.
Not, he would have a lot of opportunity to do anything else, but yeah, he did the robot.
Oh, that is some sexy.
Glad
man
I missed that
corpulence
party.
Right now. Is he
Turn
wearing a
down the-
brosier? Impressive. All right. Well, you've heard of the right to die, but what about when you want to live? Some states are all about trying to tell you what you can put in your body, and now more of them are about the right to try. We'll tell you exactly what that is. Very interesting subject. Stay with us. This is The Independent. Thanks so much for watching. A new issue came to the fore when two Americans fighting deadly Ebola were given an experimental serum that hadn't been tested on humans, only on primates, lesser primates. Hysterics worried the drugs could have side effects, which probably wouldn't be worse than dying and bleeding out your eyes. Let's talk about this. Our panel is back, Kevin Williamson and Jimmy Failla. Now, Kevin, you have written about this recently for National Review.
Sure.
And it's kind of strange that the World Health Organization wouldn't authorize this serum to be given to the 1,600 people in Africa who are currently sick with Ebola. Those are just the people we know of.
Well, at least on a voluntary basis. You know, it's typical bureaucratic nonsense because the serum hasn't been approved by the FDA, and so the WHO won't approve its use even on a voluntary experimental basis because
even if people are saying, "I'm going to die,"
right? And again,
because I don't have an IV.
It's the sort of thing that makes you want to
sick and superstitious.
Kill yourself because I mean, you know. You can't have this drug because it might make you sick when you have, you know, late-stage Ebola, which is not a very good thing to have. So I understand limitations on, for instance, certain experimental vaccines that they think might lead to outbreaks of infectious diseases,
Sure.
but that's not really the case here. And eventually the thing has to go to human trials before it ever gets approved. So making these things available to people on a voluntary basis, I think, is something that makes sense. And we have a big problem with this in the United States where we have the what's it called? Humanitarian use. The FDA will sometimes allow people to use drugs.
Sure.
Yeah, but it takes forever to get through the process. It's very difficult to get done. They don't do it often.
And people die trying, and it's really frustrating. And when you're given a stage 4 cancer diagnosis, you know, the first thing that people tell you is, well, maybe you can get in on one of those clinical trials. Like maybe there's a miracle drug out there, which they probably exist, but because it takes so long from, you know, a drug's discovery to its approval by the FDA, people die in the process.
Well, at some point, you
It's
just
so
have to do a
inhumane.
cost-benefit analysis when someone's got, you know, a late-stage terminal disease, whether it's cancer, HIV, or something else. How much risk does an experimental treatment really pose to them? Well, I mean, honestly, not that much.
Yeah, I think anything that aids the life of the terminally ill should be green lit. Like, forget medicinal weed, medicinal prostitution. Just go for it.
Yeah.
You're dying in 2 weeks. Throw the fastball. You know what I mean?
By the way, and some of these drug companies are worried about lawsuits, but if you sign something that says, you know what, I'm not going to sue you. Let's just try it. Let's throw a Hail Mary. Let's talk about Texas. That's what we want to do. We're talking about the right to try. Texas governor and once and future presidential hopeful Rick Perry has been indicted for abuse of power, but he's fighting the power, saying the indictment in and of itself is an abuse of power. Will his boldness pay off?
I think so. I mean, I've seen half of the liberal tweetosphere basically say, what the hell is this thing even about? On MSNBC, they're kind of raising their eyebrows at it. It's this weird thing because the Texas governor has the least amount of power, basically, of any governor. The Texas legislature meets for 4 months every 2 years, something like that.
I mean, legislature, they're the best.
That's not an exaggeration. I wasn't telling a joke. That's what they do.
Fantastic.
I think it's 107 days every other year.
Yeah,
That's a good gig.
107.
So good.
But compare that to New Jersey, where because of progressive kind of the structure of the state, the New Jersey governor appoints everybody. I mean, there's a reason why there's always corruption in New Jersey, and yet somehow in Texas, people are criminal, or have the book thrown at them for being elected officials. It's very bizarre.
I mean, David Axelrod called the whole thing sketchy, which, I mean, this is a former Obama apparatchik. What we're actually looking at is a situation where Rick Perry is in trouble for threatening to veto something. That's kind of his job.
It was a district attorney who got super sloshed and,
Again, still threatening to veto something.
Yeah, what's interesting about this is that I followed this particular office for a long time. This is the Public Integrity Unit, which is great because we have a corrupt Public Integrity Unit in Texas. That's wonderful. But the point here is not to convict people. You know, they indicted K. Bailey Hutchison. They indicted Tom DeLay. When it came time for K. Bailey Hutchison's case to go to trial, prosecution didn't even present a case. They just walked away from it because the whole point is to harass and terrorize and if possible bankrupt people, as they nearly did with Tom DeLay, and chase them out of office. So, the DeLay case was thrown out ultimately, and the judge said the evidence suggests they were actually trying to comply with the law, not trying to get around it. The Hutchison case, they wouldn't even try to prosecute. And so Perry's not going to get convicted, but that's not the point. The point is to have stupid newspapers like the one in my hometown did today write headlines, Perry joins GOP felons club.
He's happy. I think he's happy.
He loves it.
Of course he does.
This emboldens him, and he's actually, you know what? No, I'm going to fight this. I'm going to fight this. I'm going to fight my enemies, and I'm going to fight you people, too. One arm tied behind my back, Emmanuel Lewis. You know who I'm coming for. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. Will we see you on the after show?
We'll be here.
Very good. Explain to Kevin what it is so he's comfortable and willing. All right? We're not
Gotta give him the password, too.
Libertarians.
Gets really dicey in this neighborhood in about 20 minutes.
The safe word. Watermelon. All right, a sit down with a woman who makes everyone want to stand up and applaud her beauty and wisdom, Andrea Tantaros.
It's like that for my mellow, my man. No, we do it like that. This for my mellow, my man. It's like this for my mellow.
All right, she's the pride of Pennsylvania and a shining light on Fox News channels The Five, as well as Outnumbered. She's fluent in 4 languages and knows how to quickly dissemble her opponent's gibberish. Andrea Tantaros joins us. Welcome. I can't believe I said Tantaros when you were...
That was the best intro anyone's ever given me.
Is that true?
On Fox. Yes.
Oh, that's sweet.
That was the coolest intro ever.
Of course, and you're so kind to be here. You work your tail off. I mean, you literally are working on 2 shows full time. How do you manage not only the schedule, but the passion for the stories? And this is what we were talking about today in our meeting. Like, what gets you out of bed? Like, when you get out of bed and you want to tackle a story, what lately or what overall, like, really excites you?
Well, what gets me out of bed is the thought about having coffee. Like that, without coffee, I don't think I could function.
Nescafe?
I have the little, what's it called, the Tassimo?
Oh, yeah.
It's life-changing.
The Tassimo is amazing. The pods?
Amazing.
Yeah.
I actually really deeply care about these stories.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them I'm like, why are we doing this? This is silly. This is stupid. But most of them, I deeply care about what's going on. So I feel like I have my dream job because I'm really passionate about it. So when you do something you love, it doesn't really feel like work.
Yeah.
I mean, I love coming here. I love what I do. And this is a huge news cycle. It's an important time in the country. Been doing this for about, 7 years. And I feel like now it is really, we're at a crossroads.
Yeah. Do you feel like you cover things differently on The Five than on Outnumbered? Because they're very different shows. I mean, they're panel shows, and there's a lot of interaction and conversation. And, but they have a totally different feel.
Yeah, they do. Someone asked me, Brian Kilmeade asked me today, he's like, which one do you like better? I said, it's like kids. You don't pick your favorite, although I do tend to pick favorites sometimes. But I don't have a favorite, and it all depends on who you're with. I mean, I find that when you're on Outnumbered, we laugh a little bit more, and we get a little sillier, and we have a little bit more fun. I think it all depends on who's on with you that day.
Yeah.
But I think it is a different discussion.
Do you ever fight with the dudes?
The dudes, Geraldo and I almost killed each other last week.
Yeah,
well, he almost.
Oh no, he got a little crazy last time he was on.
I called him an apologist for terrorism.
Yeah,
he was blaming Israel.
I thought that was a little out of line. I kind of agreed with him.
Well,
really?
Yeah, but
why
we
you
don't
gotta
have to
be
go
like
there.
that?
You don't have to go there.
Well,
In front of the company?
Yeah, I mean
they're
that's
both
fair.
we're both friends.
But
we're all friends.
he was making excuses for Hamas. He was, and I thought that was ridiculous. And then he tried to say that I'm allowed to do it because I have a star tattoo on my thumb. Since when does a tattoo give you the right to smear Israel? I mean, I don't understand. I was like, is that a Star of David? Is that Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star? What is? I don't even think it is a star. I don't know.
Well, that's an interesting story today because we just saw the 24-hour extension. I think the specific issue he was talking about there was using like a tank round as though it were precision-guided munitions. And I think the important thing to keep in mind is when you have a war, some sort of military conflict, there are almost certainly going to be errors on both sides. Like people will do things that afterwards one might look at and say, hey, you know what? That wasn't really cool. And it seems as though it's very difficult in certain companies to actually say anything like that about the Israelis when they are, yes, going after Hamas, appropriately so,
but we're
talking. You need a measured response. You need an appropriate
response. This
response.
isn't a war.
She's about to own you. I'm telling you, the first time I sat next to her on Outnumbered,
that doesn't
I realized that she was one of the best prepared people that I've talked to.
We're not talking about like the British fighting the Americans. We're not talking about like the French fighting the Germans.
Sure.
We are talking about the Israelis fighting a terrorist organization. And the policy of the United States used to be a lot tougher on terrorist organizations. Now, I feel like we're legitimizing them. I mean, our State Department is scolding and asking Israel to come to the table to explain itself for retaliating after trying to keep the peace and agreeing to a ceasefire with a terrorist organization.
The issue isn't the retaliation, so much the retaliation against Hamas. It's the retaliation that happens to kill civilians. Like, that is a problem.
Yeah, but who's putting the civilians in front of the rockets? The terrorist
like
group, Hamas.
Like I said,
That's
I think that's the criticism, and I think that's a fair criticism, and you at least have a conversation about that. The issue, however,
now here comes the
as you mentioned,
No, I think that's a false argument.
with
I
the
think
terrorist
people do that. I think
organization,
that's a
with the
false
terrorist
argument.
organization, the question is, how do you go about ending these groups? Do you try to kill them all? Do you actually go
We've
for
asked that on
political
the show
integration?
many times.
Do you try to engage? They're negotiating right now. They're having a conversation. It seems to me you do not get to a resolution unless you engage these people and say, look, get involved in the political process, cut out the asymmetric warfare.
You know what?
Their antics are pathetic and bad.
Okay, I'm gonna
It's thinking like this, and I'm really, I mean, it's thinking like this that is so profoundly naive that we can have a dialogue with this.
Right.
You can't talk to them.
pretty
It's like people who
sophisticated
say,
and
let's have a
nuanced.
summit with the radical Islamists, a summit
Okay, I'm
to
gonna
try and
ask you-
reason with them. The only thing is people
what they're doing
understand,
right now.
We're
the only
running
thing
out
they
of time,
understand
and I
is a
have to
bullet
ask
to
a
the
really
brain.
important question. I have
That's
the
it.
most important question of the night.
Go for it.
For anyone, I mean, including Eli Lake and Santita Jackson, does doing more housework get you more sex?
This is important.
You know, I don't know.
man.
Because there's a conflicting study that says that men look, they're emasculated
Yeah.
if they use a vacuum.
Yeah, but I tell you,
think it's
I
kinda
can
sexy.
hear the melee warming up right now. My husband's like,
I am great with the vacuum.
I think it's kind of sexy. If the
Swiffer?
laundry
Man
is
with
done.
a Swiffer? Hello, yeah.
A guy did my
done?
laundry once, and I found that to be very hot.
I mean, was it a place where you drop off your laundry and?
No, he actually did them in his apartment. It was folding. He folded them. He did darks. He did lights. I was like, wow, I love you.
I have more clothes that you can launder. I'm going to take them off right now. Oh, no, I'm nude. Andrea, thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you so much.
I will see you on Outnumbered. You're not going to be on tomorrow.
No.
But you'll be on
I'll
Wednesday and Friday.
Five, yes.
Absolutely. And she will
can't
be on the
wait to be
5
on again
tomorrow
together.
at 5 p.m. Eastern on Fox News Channel. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kennedy.
I know. And she understands that because she speaks Espanol and Francais. And Elenica, one journalist could be bound for jail, and he calls the president the greatest enemy to press freedom in a generation. He's right, but who is he? Find out next. Welcome back. James Risen is a New York Times journalist and author, and his 2005 book, State of War, got him in deep yogurt when he revealed the botched CIA operation in Iran. He could go to jail for revealing his source, for not revealing his source, and that encroachment into press freedom has Matt Welch fired up. This is where it's Matt.
It has James Risen fired up. He said over this weekend that Barack Obama is the greatest enemy to press freedom in a generation. People don't want to believe that he cracks down on whistleblowers, but he totally does. He has the right to say that because he lost at the Supreme Court, so they can compel him to go to jail if he doesn't reveal his source.
Yeah.
But this is not the only person, the only entity that this administration and this president has gone after in attacking the freedom of the press.
No, there's another James, and that's James Rosen. And you back off, people. You back off the press. Thank you so much for watching tonight. Go to our webpage now for our live web show After Hours, foxbusiness.com/theindependence. We're going to have all sorts of good people, including Jimmy, Kevin, and Andrea from Matt Welch and Kmele Foster. I thank you very much for watching, keeping tuned, keeping tabs. Love you.